Welcome to another edition of Smalltalk for you. This morning I wanted to start taking a look at the logging framework that's built into VA Smalltalk. It is a port of Log4j, so Smalltalk, called obviously Log4s. It works pretty much the same way the Java framework does if you're familiar with that. I'm not, so I kind of had to pick this up from scratch. But it's pretty well documented. If you go into the VA help, you'll find that it's documented. The only issue I ran into is that it mentions a class log manager, which does not exist. You want to use ES log manager. It's actually the same thing, so if you just kind of mentally replace that from the documentation, and I'm sure instantiations will adjust that in the next release. But in any case, it's pretty simple to use. If you just want to use the root logger, the one that already exists, and you don't want to do anything else, this mostly works as is. I'm going to execute this, and it's going to go to a file. Now, it's going to go to a file because of a couple of things I've done. Let me first open up the file that it dropped that out to. I called this va-log.log, and you see here it says this is a warning beware, and it came up with a default format. You might wonder, how did that happen? Well, you could create all of these things programmatically, and I'll go through that in a future screencast, but the documentation is pretty good about explaining how this works. If you go in here to the initialization file, and every VA image has a .ini associated with it, and this has your typical Windows type key value pair stanzas like this. If you go down to the bottom, I've added a new one, Log4s. So this is what you want to do. Add something like this. Make sure you put in these three. This is documented in the documentation. They have to be there. And they don't have to be these values, but they have to be there. Something, and I'll explain in a future screencast what the possibilities are for things like global level. Here I've defined a file appender, and you can have a transcript appender, a console appender, which on Windows is kind of pointless, but if you're on Linux it might serve a purpose. And you give it a name. This is what it's called. It's going to go to root, so it's going to the root logger. I haven't defined a new one. This is the file name and a couple of other pieces of information. This is the pattern, which if you're familiar with the way these things work in logging frameworks, you can see what's going on here. I'm not going to get into that right now, but you specify this kind of information and you drop out this kind of log thing here. So you have the date here, you have the warning, and then you have the string that came out. And that's really all there is to it. You could then start adding logging in. There are various things you can do with this more complexity, filtering warning things in and out of, depending on how you want to do things, so that you could have one set of logging in development, and when you deploy, turn a whole bunch of it on and off. So you could have tons of information at one level, lots less information at another level. So you could deploy with some information, deploy with other information, pretty much any configuration you want. We'll go through that in future screencasts. For now, this is what you need to remember. Set this up in your ini file, and then to use it, just something like this. So that's about it for today. Until next time, have fun with whatever Smalltalk you're using.